Welcome to this Masterclass video on System Administration for Iris Docs. I'm Charles Whiteman and I hope you find this video useful and informative. This video will be covering these subjects. Content included is aimed especially for customers who are already familiar with using Iris Docs. Maybe you have a general, semi-technical understanding and you're interested in knowing aspects of system administration. Perhaps you'd like knowledge that will allow you to realise more of the potential of the software by being able to take more control over everyday checks or tasks. Or maybe you'd like to know more about how users are added or how filing structure works. These questions and plenty more will be answered throughout the course of this Masterclass video for Iris Docs administration. So first things first, let's jump across to Iris Docs. And it's the administration selection here that we're going to be focusing on in this video. Here's the admin group, and only members of the admin group have access to all of the options within this menu system. Some features may depend on administrative rights on the network. That's partly why some customers prefer to leave this to the server login. That's the account that your system was installed using when Iris Docs was put onto the server. In my case, I've already got my server available through a remote desktop window. Going into the admin group, the two options that you have is either to add members to the group or remove members from the group. Members, as you'll find throughout the course of this video, members refers to users. If you don't have the administration options available, then you're not a member of the admin group. Members of the admin group don't have to be a domain administrator to access all the system administration options, but some features may require some admin rights. Adding a user to the admin group does not mean they automatically have access to all documents. Please do not remove the administrator account from the admin group, as that could have unintended consequences. First of all, show filing cabinets. This shows me the filing cabinets within this system, and selecting within that, this shows me folders within the system. Double clicking a filing cabinet or a folder allows us to review the types of information that can be stored within this folder, i.e. the types of information that are associated with it. Those members and groups also associated with the folder. And the security profile. The security profile governs what those users can do with documents stored in the folder. So in this particular case, we can see that documents can be opened, edited, but they can't be deleted. The security profile can't be altered. We can view metadata, and we can edit metadata, or sometimes that's referred to as refile and save. And lastly, view the event history. So as an example of how all of these settings hang together, taking the example of this document in my in tray, I'm going to file and save, and I'm able to select client files because I'm a member of that folder, either directly or through group membership. And I'm able to select these categories from the drop-down list because they've been associated with the folder at this level. And just to reinforce, you have control over where information is stored within Iris Docs by the folder that you associate it with. Everything within the file and save option is to do with creating or maintaining filing structure and categories, and later in the video we'll have a look at maintaining some of the existing structure. Within the security settings, there's an option for security profiles and privilege presets, both of which we'll have a more detailed look at later in the video. And the users area is to do with maintaining existing users, importing new users, or creating something called an external member. Within groups, after users have been added to the system, groups can be utilized to simplify folder membership, or a group can be created to provide an in-tray that multiple people can access. And by associating a folder with an Active Directory group, these can be synchronized automatically. Secure storage is an area which includes features that are used for support purposes or after a server relocation. Maintain text indexes is effectively about search efficiency and making sure the database holds optimal data. Metadata index refers to text values stored in the database, so when users file and save documents, picking or typing values from drop-down lists and document reference text boxes, these are metadata values, whereas content indexes refers to words contained within the documents themselves. Index numbers tells the system to attempt OCR indexing for numerical values. Noise words are excluded from indexing because otherwise they might come up so frequently in search results so as to offer no practical purpose. Noise words are stored in a file on the server, and this file can be added to or taken away from as the case may be. And lastly, schedules and indexing times allows an administrator to decide when content or metadata indexing takes place. The scanning options here, these relate to USB scanners, so that's a local scanner connected to a local desktop PC via a USB cable. And the kinds of options that an administrator can control through the presets would be things like the size, type, orientation and resolution that a document can be scanned in, as well as more advanced features such as blank page detection, page deskewing, or hole punch removal. Your product registration settings don't contain any features that require constant maintenance. Licenses these days are updated automatically via the internet, but can still be maintained manually. Allocate users to products is useful for installations and applying licenses to multiple users. Server licenses can be maintained, but I wouldn't advise making any changes here without first seeking advice from support. As a user of the system, I hope you're already familiar with the fact that for each document, via its properties and event history, it's possible to see what's happened to that document from the point that it entered the IrisDocs system. However, via auditing, not only limited to looking at a per document level, but at a system level, whereas the expunge log deals with the log of those documents that have actually been completely removed from IrisDocs. Here are the Iris OpenSpace settings. Iris OpenSpace is a collaborative tool for accountancy practices and clients to share documents with each other and get client approval electronically. Entering these account details and settings allow documents to be published to OpenSpace from IrisDocs. This relates to the ability to select a document and publish. These email settings apply to customers who purchased Email Manager, and these settings contain references to the journal account that Email Manager points to and the rules used to file emails automatically. The Global Settings option contains a range of settings and options that affect all users or elements of system configuration. Show indexing file types. This refers to the types of file whose content will be indexed. And create an indexing file type provides additional flexibility to being able to add further compatible file types for content indexing. DPE refers to and means Document Processing Engine, and it's the mechanism by which external data or documents are automatically imported into IrisDocs. Netscan paths refer to local Windows folders which are used, typically, by network scanners to deliver scanned documents to. A Netscan path keeps watch on a folder and is linked to an in-tray or a folder within IrisDocs. whereas Link Manager facilitates the importing of documents and data. And we'll be exploring both of these options later in the video. Expunge documents. This is the facility to fully remove documents from the system that have been marked as deleted. As mentioned earlier, when a document is deleted, it's effectively switched off from view in the database. However, the document and its metadata still reside within the database and on the server. Expunging is the process by which those documents are fully removed from the database and the server. And finally, document reclaim. When a user is disabled within Iris Docs, it's possible that documents may still exist in that user's in-tray. Document Reclaim is a feature that allows a system administrator to move such documents to another user's in-tray. So that's the overview of the administration features, and if you're unsure about the impact of any changes, do speak to the support team before making any. If you're watching this video and have plans to relocate Iris Docs, please do not attempt this, and instead you should contact your account manager or the Iris support team. In this part, we'll look at features which relate to user maintenance, adding a user and how groups and privileges apply. We'll also look at dealing with removing users and how groups can be maintained using Active Directory, and also how security profiles work within Iris Docs. As mentioned at the start, this video is aimed at Iris users of Docs, and as such, external members is a less important feature. External members are important where customers don't have a computer domain. This is sometimes referred to as a workgroup environment. Or external members can be used to provide credentials for a user who is not part of the computer domain. We'll be focusing though on systems that do use Active Directory and therefore Windows authentication. As you can see by the pieces of the jigsaw, users, groups, privileges and licenses are all related when adding a new user to the system. Groups are often used to simplify folder membership. Privileges define which features of the product can be accessed or used. So the process of adding a user is to import it, then apply licenses, group membership, and apply a privilege preset. But of course, depending on your setup, additional tasks like setting a Netscan path might also be required. I'm going to start by importing a test user to my system. Importing a user from Active Directory is one feature that depends on domain admin rights. Some customers prefer to simply log on to the server for performing administration related tasks, and that tends to negate admin rights issues. In this example, the user has already been added to Active Directory, so I can go ahead and import the user. And I'm adding a user called Charles. Once you've clicked import, you might think that that's the task complete. However, if you recall the jigsaw pieces, you'll understand that there are a few more things to complete. First, I'm going to add the licenses on the Products tab, and I'm selecting the licenses that would apply to a typical Iris customer with the Iris Link integration and email manager. Next step is to add the user to the relevant groups, and for Iris Docs customers, the Iris Docs group would tend to be selected as standard. If open space is in use, I would select that as well, along with any other groups that are relevant for the new user. At this point, I'm going to pause the process of importing the user to look at groups in more detail. Earlier we said that the purpose of groups is to simplify folder membership or to provide departmental or group in-trays. An example of how folder membership is simplified is the Client Files folder. Here you can see that the System Administrator account is named explicitly as a member of the folder, as well as the Iris Docs group. So by adding Charles to the Iris Docs group, we've automatically made him a member of this folder. It's important to remember that a user has to be a member of a folder, added individually or by group membership, in order to save or retrieve documents to or from it. As you can see, in my system there are only 2 folders. However, if I were looking at a system with lots of folders, then by creating and allocating the right groups to the right folder means that adding users in future to the correct group saves me having to review each of the folders for explicit membership. An example of how a group can be used as an in tray for multiple people to access is the open space in tray and the office scanning in tray, because documents landing in either of these 2 in trays will be accessible by members of those groups. Coming back to the process of adding this user, product licenses have been added, user has been added to relevant groups. The last tab that requires some action is the security tab. And what we need to do is apply what's called a privilege preset. At the moment, if the user tried to log on, they wouldn't be able to use the product because the privilege preset hasn't been attached, and privileges define what features of the product a user can access. In your system, you may have a number of different privilege presets, or a standard implementation of Iris Docs provides one general privilege for a uniform, consistent experience across all users. So I'm going to complete that process. And one last thing is, if the user needs to be able to receive scanned documents via a network scanner that initially sends images to a Windows folder, this option may be required, but clicking OK completes the process. Your privilege presets, under Show Privilege Presets, is the general privilege that you've just seen attached to the new user. This is where it lives. Within the privilege preset and the settings, you can explore what all of the different privileges are. As new features are developed into the product, you may find these as unchecked privileges within the system, so this is worth knowing about. This slide illustrates how Netscan works. Netscan is the feature that allows Iris Docs to receive scanned documents generated using a network scanner, or MFD. To be able to administer Netscan properly, access to the server is likely to be required because there are folders which will be residing on the server that may need to be created or accessed directly. The Netscan feature is located within DPE, or Document Processing Engine, and we have the option to show Netscan paths or create a Netscan path. Earlier on in the video, when the user called Charles was imported, on the Security tab, I mentioned that this user is included for dynamic Netscans may be important, and it relates within Show Netscan Paths to the dynamic path, which is a default setting in newer versions of Iris Docs. Having imported the user to Iris Docs, what I would then do is take that user's login name, and within my Netscan parent folder simply create a new directory using that user's Windows login name. The dynamic Netscan path only has to be pointed towards the Netscan path's parent folder. Thereafter, it's the Windows username that means Iris Docs knows whose user in tray within Iris Docs a document should be delivered to. So no matter how many users there are, only one dynamic Netscan path and one Windows folder is all that's required for user maintenance. If I wanted to set up folders to accommodate scanned images but not based on usernames, then I would create a separate parent folder and create a folder within that. In this example, we'll call it Office Scanning. And then when I create my Netscan path, I take that folder location, create it, and tell the system to watch that folder and where to deliver the documents to, in this case Office scanning. And in Iris Docs, wherever you have this feature, show feedback in Service Monitor when processing files. When that's available, I usually find it's worth ticking it. So the result of that configuration works like this. If I just take the place of the scanner, deliver a document to the folder, Iris Docs and Netscan polls the folders every 60 seconds, and when it detects new documents have arrived, it will pick them up and then remove them from the folder and deliver them to the in tray that was configured when the Netscan path was created. Office scanning in tray, one document. One thing about users, when users are added, although it's possible to add lots of people to a group simultaneously or through product registration, allocate users to products all in one list, the same can't be said of the privilege preset. So when your system was installed, if there are more than about 5 users, the chances are we would have used Active Directory synchronization to pull all of those users in order to allocate to the Iris Docs group to apply the licenses and also the privilege preset. And this is where, as I say, Active Directory synchronization with a group can be useful. Or with customers who have lots of users or a higher turnover of staff, then this approach could also be useful as well for time saving. Within a group and Active Directory group, we can link this to a previously created group within Active Directory. So as an example, in my Active Directory, I have a group, Iris Docs users. What I could then do is add my members. Once they're added to that group, I can then come back here search for the group within Active Directory and select OK. At this point, I'm now able to determine a default set of privileges and also product licenses. Groups are synchronized automatically at midnight every day, or indeed manually via synchronized groups. Now logged on as a different user, Charles Whiteman, not a member of the administrators group, what I'd like to do now is have a look at the purpose and the operation of security profiles within Iris Docs. Security profiles determine what users can do with documents that are filed in particular folders within Iris Docs. Earlier on, when we were looking at the example of the client files folder and the security profile that is attached to it and what the user can do with documents, what users can do with documents, we highlighted that it can be opened, edited, but not deleted. So that's why when Charles as a user finds documents, the option to delete is grayed out. And of course you may not want to change the security on the folder to allow everybody to delete documents. More likely you'll want to give a smaller number of people the ability to delete, if at all. And the way to facilitate that is through the security and the security profile. So the purpose of the security profile is to allow us to identify or explicitly name specific users to have different rights to that setup folder level. And the way I could give Charles access rights to delete is by adding him to the security profile like this. And importantly, selecting Charles, I can provide additional options, or fewer options, as the case may be. After all, it's possible to have a folder where a user could store documents but not necessarily have access to all of the documents within that folder. So in summary, the security profile is used to identify members who need to have different access rights to documents to those set at folder level. And finally, for part 3, how to deal with users or external members which are no longer required. Once users have been added and after they have accessed Iris Docs, it will not be possible to delete the user because there are relationships in the database that can't be removed. Rather than deleting the user, instead the login is disabled. Under the Login tab, deselect User is active. On the Products tab, remove all the licenses. Alternatively, it would be possible to transfer the login to a different Windows user, provided that this won't create a duplicate entry in the system. So in summary, when adding users, they require product licenses, group membership, or explicit membership of folders, along with a privilege preset. And do bear in mind additional tasks when adding or removing users, such as Netscan paths that may need adding or removing. In this part, we're going to have a look at how filing structure works in Iris Docs, and then how to add an information type to the existing client file structure. A point to note though, if when I say filing structure you think Windows folders, then this will be something new to you, and to a certain extent it's about relearning what filing structure means. And really it would be better if we just renamed it as referencing structure. Let's have a look at the existing setup so that we can have a look at some of the basic terminology. Choose an info type. So this is the high-level category of document, and it provides users with some visual feedback when displaying documents in search results. I'm not sure if you picked up on that. The system has gone straight past what's called the standard document. So you have information type, standard document. In this case, we've just got one called client document, and as there's only one, the system just chooses it by default. And then the document reference text boxes. The document references require text values to be entered or selected by users filing documents. A document reference can be linked to a fixed list to provide pre-populated drop-downs, and typically that's what the existing setup looks like. So the important bits of terminology is information type, standard document, document references, and possibly fixed lists. And they all fit together one way. Staying with the client files referencing structure as an example, here are the document references, and this is where a document reference is married to a fixed list. Here's the standard document, where the references have been added and the order organized, along with other values such as whether it's editable or mandatory. In the Records Management tab, one can define how long the system will prevent any user with the ability to delete documents from doing that. One can also set a time period before documents are then automatically marked as deleted. Here are the information types, with the client document attached to define how the document should be referenced. And folders are maintained by selecting Edit Members and Info Types. You may recall that a double click allows us to review, but if we want to make changes, then we need to right click and select Edit. In terms of how to add a new category, let's take an example scenario where a user has requested the addition of a new information type. They'll probably call it a folder, but here we can create the information type and provide it with the preferred name. For consistency, we'll give it a description. And we do want the information type to be indexable, otherwise users won't be able to file documents using this category when filing and saving. Thinking back to the jigsaw pieces, the last piece of the puzzle will be to add the information type to the folder. Done simply by adding it and clicking OK. And it's a good idea at this point to update this folder only. And of course the measure of success will be to test when filing and saving whether that new category appears, which it does. When considering new folders and referencing structure for areas beyond client filing, the most important thing is plan it first. This style of layout allows one to visualize the structure and keep it in line with those all-important jigsaw pieces. But this could be a whole video in itself. So that's the file and save menu overview, and all as I would say is making any changes to the existing filing structure, just beware that changes to the client files area could potentially impact the link integration. And lastly, if you're planning to use the system for additional filing areas, then the 80-20 rule definitely applies, i.e. it's 80% planning and 20% plugging things into the system, because once you create structure and use it, you'll find it hard to remove. Iris Docs depends on its server and underlying network to operate correctly. In this, the last part of the video, we'll have a look at where the critical elements of the software are and what you need to take into consideration when updating either Iris or Iris Docs, and the main things that need to be backed up. And then we'll have a look at system monitoring, where the settings for Email Manager are, and we'll end the video with a couple of housekeeping items. For anything to do with system monitoring, updating or backing up, access to the server is a must. Docs depends on a bunch of services available through the console window. And then scroll down to where the services begin with the word Invu. For the purpose of this video, I'm going to ignore the workflow service as that doesn't appear in a typical installation. Instead, I'll start with the business engine. The business engine relies on SQL Server, and all of the other Invu services rely on the business engine. The secure store provides users with access to documents. The ECM service is the one that the Outlook plugin talks to so that your tick boxes or category colors update. So issues with any of these would cause all users to experience problems of some kind. The other system service is the Iris Docs Fixed Lists, which communicates with Iris and provides Docs with its integrated lists of client names and codes when they're added or changed in Iris. And the processing engine pulls documents into the system via the Netscan paths that we looked at earlier. And the data hub is the one that processes emails automatically when you have Email Manager. The search engine deals with all requests from users to find documents, i.e. when a user does a search, the computer passes the request to the server does the work and gives the user their list of documents. The OCR engine, as you can see, it's not started and it's not required in a typical installation. And the indexing engine service deals with making content searchable and available to users. And underpinning all of these services is an Active Directory account. We often refer to this as the S6 service account. However, depending on who or when your installation was completed, this may vary. For system monitoring, the Services console is always going to be the first port of call, just to check that all of the correct services are indeed running. To monitor and see what the system is currently doing, the Iris Docs Services Monitor is a really good application. As the Iris Docs services perform their functions, they pass messages back to the Service Monitor. This allows an administrator to gain real-time insight into how the system is performing. For example, under the processing engine window, we can identify that the fixed list service is updating correctly, and where there are Netscan paths, those messages are also fed back through the system as well. And via the Data Hub window, we're able to see how Email Manager is processing emails, and which rule processed an email, whether it was by client code or by email address, or perhaps one of the rules that exclude emails from being captured. So this is a really useful tool for real-time system monitoring. If by any chance you don't have the shortcut to the service monitor, that's available through the program directory. So for checking that the system overall is functioning correctly, we have the services console for real-time monitoring of the dock services, the services monitor, and to go back further in time to see what the system has previously done, then within the program data and Invu, the log files are stored here. A fourth tool for monitoring is Analytics, which is a new feature with 6.12. If you have questions such as how many documents were put into the system last month, or how many deleted documents there are pending expunge, or how many documents are sitting in people's in trays, then this tool will give you valuable insight. Prior to updating core Iris Accountancy Suite, there are just a couple of services that do need to be stopped first to prevent database connections messages. And the two services that need to be stopped is the Invu V6 Data Hub and the Iris Docs Fixed List service, both of which communicate with Iris on a fairly continuous basis. Naturally, once the update process is complete, these services should be started again. Just before updating Iris Docs, it is important to back up the SQL database, and in the latest systems the database will be called Iris Docs, but it could be called Open Docs for older systems, or even Series 6 for pre-existing Invu systems. Of course, this should be being backed up already, but specifically prior to running an update. When updating using this feature, the updater itself will manage starting and stopping services. It's highly likely on your server that you'll find a share called Iris Docs Share. This was created when your system was installed, and it contains a copy of the Series 6 client folder. That's the installer for the desktop workstation. And you may find it useful to update this share with a copy of the new Series 6 client installer, so that when you come across the odd workstation that doesn't want to update automatically, it's here ready and waiting. And if you're not sure where the location of the share is, under Global Settings, Outlook Add-in, and the Office Add-in install path. The first part of the file path provides the location of the share. A moment ago, I mentioned that the Series 6 or Iris Docs database needs to be backed up. You or your IT company should already be managing that, and as part of that process, the S6 folder should also be backed up. This is the folder that contains the physical files that your system holds. If you're not sure precisely what this location is, within Iris Docs and Secure Storage, show Secure Locations. And here will be the physical path to the S6 folder. Preferably, both the database and the Series 6 folder should be backed up simultaneously. Earlier on we were looking at the service monitor, and in the Data Hub window, messages to show how emails were processed. All of the settings to do with Email Manager are here within Email Settings and Show Email Paths. The email path indicates the mailbox that Email Manager is connected to, and within the path itself are the filing rules. A standard set of rules contains a no-file rule, and what that means is any email containing this keyword will not be filed anywhere, as the filing action equals do nothing. Some standard rules that we put in place to stop the system from capturing too many emails includes the exclude out of office rule, so where the subject of an email starts with the word out of office, like the last rule, it will do nothing with it. And that goes the same for automatic replies and read receipts. Where you have a need to exclude an email address from being matched, the exclusion list rule will handle that. The exclusion list rule is fed from a source spreadsheet contained within the share and can be accessed via a desktop computer. Or it's possible to exclude email addresses or domains at this level as well. The iris lookup rule checks emails for client codes, which always takes precedence over the rule that was extended to look for a match based on any email address held in the iris database. And more recently, a rule to capture submission receipts or gateway receipts or payroll receipt emails. The maintenance window allows an administrator to check what is in the inbox of the journal account. In theory, this should always be empty or nearly empty whilst Email Manager is processing, and the only reason this would contain many emails is if the system wasn't working for some reason, or if this option for delete emails on success was left unchecked. Upgrading or changing your email provider may require you to update where Email Manager is looking for the journal account. So a final couple of housekeeping items. Earlier on I showed you how within member details a user can be deactivated when not required. The implication of doing that and the housekeeping item that you may need to consider is under document reclaim. Once a user has been disabled, Show Documents will highlight any documents in any in tray of a user that has been disabled. Selecting one or more simultaneously would then allow you to move those documents to another member of staff to be either filed or deleted, as the case may be. And lastly, to keep the database and the document store at optimal size within expunged documents, periodically it will be worth viewing what has been deleted. If a document needs to be recovered, it can be, but periodically it's worth expunging all of these documents that are definitely not required, as this frees up database and disk space. If you think your system may have issues or problems, or if you've got any questions about your Iris Docs installation, do contact the support team. And for further advice about any item featured in this video, do contact us or send questions via email. Thank you for watching.